So the 1920s in the United States and in Western Europe is called the Jazz Age. This piece is such a famous piece that it actually, in society, changes the name of the composer. Ferd Morton is from here on after known as Jelly Roll Morton, as both a composer and an artist. The type of dancing that they do changes a lot. The 20s are also known as the Roaring 20s, which is also the title of a movie that's done in the 40s about the 20s, which really cements the name Roaring 20s in there. And it's called the Roaring 20s because in the United States, our economy is really roaring. It's really rolling. Society is moving at a faster pace. We have the car, we have the telephone, radio. Things are picking up.
And the Black Bottom.
In the music jazz, the dance of the Charleston.
Okay, that dance, the Charleston, the girls who are dancing, the flappers, short, boyish haircuts, totally different than anything women have done before. What did you notice about their clothing? Yeah, I saw arms and shoulders, saw some cleavage. Not only did I see feet and ankles, but I believe occasionally I saw some knees and some bloomers. I saw underwear. I know, shocking. Absolutely, truly shocking. And how they were dancing? That's dancing? No, dancing is the waltz done in a ballroom in formation with big gowns and everybody swirling around. They were just flailing around, right? Their elders looked at this kind of dancing and this jazz music like your grandparents look at how you dance at prom and go, oh, that is dirty, that is nasty, that's ew. They're going to hell. Same kind of thing.
In simplest terms, prohibition was a ban on the manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol, as codified by the 18th Amendment in 1919. But it was part of a 70-year-long movement to rid the United States of the threat of demon rum.
Okay, so the temperance movement gets us prohibition. Starts in 1919 with the 18th Amendment. Outlaws alcohol. It only made alcohol more popular. Right? You can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do marijuana. And yet, if you are truthful with yourselves, how many of you know at least one other high school student who either smokes or drinks or smokes weed? Yeah. Remarkably, third hour didn't know anybody. Okay. The prohibition of something often makes it more popular, which helps to fuel the power and the growth of the mob, who takes care of providing alcohol to the folks in the speakeasies, which are the underground establishments that people would go to consume liquor and hang out. What? Okay. A lot of irony in this photograph. Eventually, prohibition is repealed by what amendment?
21st.
The 21st Amendment. Okay. A lot of it had to do with the fact that the Great Depression had started and farmers were growing grain, and grain prices were very low. But if we could manufacture alcohol, alcohol is produced from grains. All kinds of grains. All right, and then the Harlem Renaissance is the Renaissance, the rebirth of arts and interest in the arts that takes place in Harlem, New York, primarily centered around African American authors, artists, musicians, etc. Okay, this fella, Sigmund Freud, lots of people think he's Austrian. He's actually Czech, but he lives most of his professional career in Vienna, so he's thought of as Austrian. He is the father of psychoanalysis. This is the idea that everything that is wrong with you can be traced back to what happened to you in your childhood, sometimes even clear back to birth. Freud gives us wonderful psychoanalytic concepts like oral fixation. I sucked my thumb until I was in the 3rd grade. I'm working very, very hard to break my nail-biting habit. Freud would say, I have an oral fixation. I can't keep my hands out of my mouth. Freud says that's because my mother stopped breastfeeding me too young. He can find origin reasons for many of your things. Freud also believed in dream analysis. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it is Freud and this concept of psychoanalysis that gives you going to the psychiatrist today and laying on the couch and talking about your life. Okay. Albert Einstein, a Jew living in Germany, sees the rises of the Nazis coming and figures out that he should get out early enough, and he will leave Germany and come to the United States, and we will benefit greatly from that. But before that happens, he comes up with this thing called the theory of relativity. It's a very simple equation. E equals mc squared. Anybody know what that stands for? Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And what that actually tells us is that time is relative. This blows people's minds. Okay? The 20s is all about change. Change in the way we see things. Change in the way we understand things. If you think about Freud's psychoanalysis, it's changing the way you understand how you think about the world versus how somebody else thinks about the world because of the way that you were raised differently. Einstein is telling you time changes. It's not a constant. People can't believe it. They don't believe it. They research, they study, they examine his proofs. One of the first to come to terms with this is an Italian physicist by the name of Enrico Fermi. He too will find fault with the rise of the fascists and will come to the United States, as will J. Robert Oppenheimer. But Fermi takes Einstein's studies and expands upon them a little bit. He applies them to the atom. And it is Fermi who first says, we can take an atom, this thing that is one, and we can tear it into two. And this is a concept called fission, when you separate an atom into two. And what Fermi discovers is that atoms don't like to be pulled apart, and thus when you do so, they go boom. Now, depending upon what atom you pull apart, it goes pop, or it goes boom, or it goes kablam! Like when you separate a plutonium atom. Fermi and Oppenheimer, when they get together in the United States, will be put in charge of the U.S. Manhattan Project. And they will give us big kablam. You didn't even flinch. All right. Art changes. We all know what art should look like, right? We studied the Renaissance. That's art. When guys like this Frenchman, Henri Matisse, start turning this stuff out, people look at that and go, that's crap. That's not art. That's not art. Those bold colors and strange proportions, and there's definitely something wonky about that table. Didn't they study perspective and in depth of field and stuff? No, something's wrong. Where's her fingers? Is that a birth defect? What's going on? That plant, is it about to eat her head? They looked at Matisse and his fellow artists painting in this style, and they said, they're beasts. They aren't artists, they're beasts. And the French word for beast is fauve. And so they are known as fauvists. And this style of art is fauvism. Animals. guys seen this fellow before, haven't you? Pablo Picasso. Such a cute old man. He's just darling. Wouldn't you like to be bounced on his knee and call him Grandpa? And then you see his art called Cubism. This is called The Crying Lady. I would cry too if my face looked like that. Some of the traits of Fauvism, right? Bold colors, strong lines, definitely some skewed proportions, right? Understanding the geometry underlying the human form. Abstract art is what we've got here. Vasily Kandinsky is one of the early abstract artists. This is a painting out of his music series. This is one of these where you and your friends stand in the museum and look at it and go, what do you see? I don't know, what do you see? I don't know. Once I know that it's music, I can maybe see some of the clef lines. Right? Okay, somebody sees a quarter. I see piano.
A staff.
Maybe, yeah.
Only has 3 lines.
It's definitely abstract, right? Okay. Kandinsky did all kinds of different art. I want to show you one of his portraits. Okay. Abstract. All right. Paul Klee is another abstract artist. He liked to do color studies, kind of along the lines of Monet. This one, once you tell me the title, I can definitely see it. Castle and Sun is the name of it. Castle and Sun. It looks just like the building blocks that we used to fight over in kindergarten. Right? I could see turning this into a quilt, sleeping under it, maybe. All right, and then there's Dadaism. Dadaism actually comes out of Switzerland. A group of artists go to Zurich, and these folks are destroyed by the fact that nothing in the world is the same anymore. World War I has changed everything. And the Dadaists, Dadaism is not named after a person, it's a made-up word to describe this art. And these artists have decided that none of the rules apply anymore. The world is upside down. Everything is screwed up. And so they create art where none of the rules apply. Now, I don't know about you, but I think I made art like this in about 2nd grade when the teacher pulled out the stack of magazines and the glue sticks and the scissors. Yeah. This is kind of representative of Dadaism, but I could show you 50 pieces of Dadaist art and none of them would be the same. Okay? And then Salvador Dali. Almost everybody's heard of Dali. Dali is one of the preeminent surrealist artists. He's saying the world is what it is, but then there's the world on this whole other level. Everything is kind of in a dream state. It's also surreal. Dali himself, he made himself art. He's always doing something different with his mustache. Another one of the photos I found of him, and he lives long into the age of photography, so we have lots of photos of him. He's got his mustache split into 2, and so he looks like a mouse. But he's definitely making a statement here with this portrait as well, right? Probably his most famous painting is called The Persistence of Memory. It is, Dali tells us that it is meant to express Freud's analysis of dreams. The only thing I know for sure is when I have this dream, I stop eating pizza before I go to bed. All right. Architecture changes. How we live changes. Bauhaus is a German architecture movement Steel, glass, concrete, pretty much devoid of ornamentation. Build the building for what it's needed for and use it. If you just looked at this building, you would say, well, that's modern architecture, wouldn't you? Because this 1920 style is not that different from what you see in the 1950s and the 1960s. Okay. Bauhaus style also was applied to furniture. Now, this is not a Bauhaus chair. This is Mies van der Rohe, but it is the same concept. All you have here is all you need. Legs and a seat. That's a chair. That's all you get. You don't have to have arms. You don't have to have a swivel. You don't have to have pillows and cushions. Very plain. Chrome. Very minimalist. An American architect by the name of Frank Lloyd Wright is very famous for giving us the concept form should follow function. Form should follow function. We should build things in the way that they can be used most effectively. My application of Wright would be that if I were able to design my own home, my laundry room would be in an unconventional place. How many of you have a laundry room in the basement? How many of you have a laundry room off of the kitchen in your mud room? Yeah. How many of you generate a tremendous amount of dirty laundry in the basement? How many of you generate a ton of dirty laundry in your kitchen? Frank Lloyd Wright would probably agree with me when I say if form follows function, I want the laundry room down by the bedrooms, because that's where I tend to change my clothes. It's where I dirty my towels. It's where my dirty sheets come from, right? A few hand towels and dish towels and washcloths out of the kitchen, right? Make sense? Do you know why they don't put the laundry room by your bedrooms? Well, how many of you live in a household where you might put in a little laundry and go to bed so that it can be moved in the morning? And you wouldn't want to hear all night. This house is called Falling Water. It's a Frank Lloyd Wright designed house. Beautiful, isn't it? It really fits the environment as well. All right, Marie Curie wins a Nobel Prize for studying radioactivity. She will pay a large price for her study of radioactivity. She will pay with her life. She learns that isotopes have half-lives, that radioactivity diminishes by half over a certain period of time. Unfortunately for Marie, the things that she's studying that are radioactive have very long half-lives, and the longer the half-life, the more radioactive something is, and the more it will cause mutations in her cells. And so we're pretty sure she dies from radiation poisoning. Then Alexander Fleming, probably the most famous guy who screwed up and got away with it. Alexander Fleming discovers penicillin, an antibiotic. The first antibiotic saves hundreds of millions of lives with this invention. But it's not what he was after. He set an experiment, left for the weekend. He comes back to the lab, experiment had failed. But he's looking at his petri dish and he's going, well, what happened on this half where nothing happened? And he abandons what he had originally been studying and tries to figure out why nothing happened on the other half of the petri dish. And in that pursuit, he discovers the first antibiotic, penicillin. And its derivatives over time have saved hundreds of millions. He will get the Nobel Prize in Medicine. And then in America, this Scopes monkey trial, as it's called. It's called the monkey trial because it's about a debate over should we be allowed to teach evolution in the schools. In the state of Tennessee, there was a law passed that said you cannot teach evolution. The American Civil Liberties Union says we need to test this law. And so they sought someone to deliberately go and break the law so that they could get it taken to court in what they call a test case. And so they get this teacher in Tennessee by the name of Scopes. He's an upstanding man in the community, attends church, well respected. He goes into school and he teaches evolution. They arrest him. The reason it's called the Scopes monkey trial is because back then in the 20s, our understanding of evolution was that man descended from apes. Okay, ape, monkey. We know it's a bit more sophisticated than that now, but we're pretty close to Darwinist times then. So it's a huge, huge media circus covered on the radio and in newsreels. William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow, two finest legal minds in the country at this time, are prosecution and defense. They look a little hot there because it was very hot in Tennessee that summer, and there's no air conditioning yet in the 1920s. Scopes is convicted. He broke the law. But it is a groundbreaking test of our educational system, our legal system, our free speech rights, and the fact that although deeply held religious beliefs were put into law, ultimately the law is found to be unconstitutional on appeal, and evolution is allowed to be taught. Section 2. We had World War I. We resolved it with what document? What agreement? The Treaty of Versailles. No more war, because we just fought the war to end all wars, the Great War. So everything's all better. Well, in France, they say, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, I guess, shame on me, but you're not going to fool me again. They say Germany invaded us in 1870. They invaded us in 1914. It's not going to happen again. And so pretty much you can hear the last bullet being fired, its echo resonating. And France is making plans to build the Maginot Line. It's this bold red line, a line of permanent entrenched defenses all along the French-German border. They are not coming through. But the dotted red line is not permanent entrenched defenses. It's some fences, some bases, some outposts, some observation posts. And the Maginot Line is not completed. By 1940, it is still incomplete. It was very expensive. And France devoted so many resources to building the Maginot Line and supplying it that France did virtually nothing to modernize her armaments in the 20 years between World Wars I and II. Now, what do you notice when you look at this map? Belgium? What about Belgium? Yeah, the French seem to have forgotten already that the Germans didn't cross the French-German border. They went where there were the least obstructions and nice level ground, and they put their weakest defenses along that border. But that's all right, because France has a treaty with Belgium, and the Belgians are going to stop the Germans if they try to come that way. There'll be plenty of warning. No problem. No problem. Here's the other thing about permanent defenses. Kate, scoot back. Scoot back up, please. There you go. All right. So this is the Maginot Line, and I want to get to Kate. And I can't get to Kate. The wall, the permanent defenses, they're stopping me. Okay? And this works because there's machine gun emplacements here, and as I'm running up against the wall and getting stuck, the machine guns are shooting me down and killing me. But let's say that it's not just me alone. I have other people. And I get some to come here and distract the machine guns and try to get Kate. And being a permanent defense, it doesn't move, and so all I have to do is go around it. All the Germans have to do is go around it. And then everything that's there, everything that's stockpiled there is worthless. But the Maginot Line is an engineering masterpiece. Look at this cross-section. Okay? Down here, you've got barracks and rest space for the troops who aren't actively on duty. There's a hospital. We've got the entrance gallery, escalators to get you up to the main gallery where you're going to work. There's magazines. Magazine is where you store ammunition and stuff. Elevators to get the ammunition up to the guns. More escalators, closer magazines, underwater water storage. There's air conditioning. All of this is connected. And that's a long ways along that length of that border. That's okay. We can get troops where we need them fast because there's trains that run fortified underground in the Maginot Line. You have a large chunk of men manning this all the time and building it. Remember, we've talked before about an economy can do war or an economy can do prosperity, but it can't do both at the same time. And while France isn't actively at war, devoting all of the resources to building this Maginot Line does not let their economy grow and prosper. Plus, they're not getting the reparations payments from Germany that they need to be getting and that they're expecting to get. And so France's economy is not bouncing back after the war like ours did. This is the top of one of those gun emplacements. There's 4 ports where the machine guns would have been looking out. There were also much larger gun emplacements with artillery mounted. You can see it's made out of iron. See how it reacts when it's hit by shells and dimpling? Yeah. Can you imagine being inside of that when a shell hits this thing? You'd be hearing bells for a long time. All right, but that's all right. The Maginot Line is really, really unnecessary. Really unnecessary, thanks to these 2 men, Kellogg and Briand. The U.S. Secretary of State and the French Foreign Minister. They get together and they negotiate a treaty. It's signed by 29 nations of the world. The Kellogg-Briand Pact, also known as the War Renunciation Treaty. It essentially outlaws war as a means of settling differences between nations. Everybody who signs this treaty says, we promise not to go to war just because we disagree with somebody. We will find other ways to work it out. Okay. Great in theory, but it has no teeth. There's no or else. There's no if then. What are you going to do if somebody breaks the Kellogg-Briand Pact and goes to war? How do you stop them from going to war? Go to war? What? That's a problem. Here's a real piece of historical irony for you folks. Legally, the Kellogg-Briand Pact is still in force for all of the signatory nations. The fellow with his pen in his hand right there is President Calvin Coolidge, signing on behalf of the United States. We promised never to go to war as a means of solving our differences with another nation. We have violated that treaty repeatedly.
If you violate a treaty like that with other countries, what happens to you?
Well, that's the point. That's why the Kellogg-Briand Pact sounds great. And then, so exactly. If Kate's my daughter and she is supposed to mow the lawn every Thursday, and I come home Thursday night from work and it's almost dark and I can see Kate didn't mow the lawn, do I just go, oh, well, no, Kate's grounded until she mows the lawn, right?
Yeah. You grab the whole thing.
Yeah, you're going to ground a kid. No, you go to war to get them to stop going to war. What? Yeah, Drew?
But didn't we pretty much, for our wars, would be loopholes because they never declared it and it was more...
Oh, we
South
totally
was terrorism.
declared World War II.
World War II, but not...
And all the others were police actions and stuff. Yeah, except that whole thing called the War Powers Act. I don't know. I think you're getting into the difference between the letter of the law and the intent of the law, or the nature of the law. Can we agree that those signatory nations are pretty hypocritical? Yeah. All right. The Irish Republican Army, back home in Ireland. The shorthand for them is the IRA. Ireland is predominantly what religion?
Catholic.
And Great Britain is predominantly Protestant. And so the Irish are ruled by the British. And the Irish would like to be ruled by the Irish. They would like what is known as home rule, where their government is based at home. Canada has home rule by this time. Australia has home rule. New Zealand has home rule. Ireland looks at those other Commonwealth nations and says, all we want is the same. And the British say, no, you can't be trusted. Why? Because they're Catholic. They're dirty papists. If we give you home rule, you'll do whatever the Pope tells you to, and we can't trust you. And so...
Excuse me, Ms. Hope.
Yes?
May I have Ms. Eberheim to the front office for a moment, please?
Yes, Miss Amy will be on her way.
Yes, thank you.
Is that your test being delivered? Maybe. All right. So the Irish form the Irish Republican Army to fight for home rule. It is going to be a bloody and long conflict. Many British soldiers and Irish members of the Irish Republican Army, many innocent people will be killed. Terrorist acts are committed in the name of Irish freedom. The British get to the point where they're about to give the Irish independence, and then World War II starts up, and they're like, oh, just wait, we'll get back to that. And then it takes them quite some time to get back to that. It is in many ways similar to the promises that we make to the Philippines. Remember, we acquired the Philippines as a result of the Spanish-American War in 1898. And very soon thereafter, the Philippines starts going, hey, that Woodrow Wilson dude, remember how he talked about self-determination? We would like that. And we're like, oh, yeah, yes, we should give you self-determination when you're strong enough to protect yourselves. Because by then, we're into the late 20s and early 30s, and who's starting to be the big, bad, menacing beast in the Pacific? Japan. And we're like, well, we better, hang out here just to protect you, just to look out for you. And then, as soon as it's safe, we'll let you go. Okay? World War II starts. Japanese take the Philippines. We reconquer them, and we immediately don't set them free. We're going to protect them. We're going to look out for them for a while yet. It's kind of messy, and it's not that different for Britain and Ireland. And then there's Japan. You talked last chapter about Japan's invasion of the northeastern Chinese territory of Manchuria. The League of Nations, remember, does exist. And there's a lot of members of the League of Nations. In fact, Japan is a member of the League of Nations. And the League of Nations wanted to protect sovereignty. And so when Japan invades Manchuria, China protests to the League of Nations and says, hey, they can't do that to us. That's not fair. That's not right. We all agreed that's not going to happen. And so the League of Nations votes and they condemn Japan. They say, shame on you. For shame. You promised. And here we have the Japanese ambassador addressing the League of Nations saying, oh yeah? I care. Nanny nanny boo boo. We quit. Japan gets condemned by the League of Nations and walks out. This is you and your buddies. Did you guys ever play outside and play tag and stuff with the neighborhood kids? Some? Okay. This is your friends all together in the front yard, and we're going to play tag, and okay, there's home base, and here's the rules, no tag backs, all that stuff. You work that out, and you're playing, and somebody starts cheating. And you call them on it, and they're like, fine, I'm going home. Japan just quits and goes home. And what does the League of Nations do? It's still really bad what Japan did to China. So nobody else here does anything like that, ever. Because it's bad and stuff. Because what else is the League of Nations going to do? A bunch of the members of the League of Nations have signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Oh, and wait, those same people had attended the Washington Naval Conference where they agreed to cut their navies down to tiny. And their armies are tiny. So even if they wanted to, it would have to be more like, Japan, we kindly request that you not keep your armies in Manchuria, or we will have to ask you again to take your armies out of Manchuria. Yeah, exactly. Japan looked at the way the world was set up in 1930, and they went, yeah, we got this. And they did. And that territory they took, they renamed. Manchuria is a very Chinese-sounding name. They had to make it sound Japanese. They call it Manchukuo. Manchukuo. And they consider it to be the first piece of what they called the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Think about that name. Greater East Asia. Where's Japan? East Asia. And Greater East Asia is just more than Japan. Co-prosperity. Co is together, right? Together we'll be prosperous. And sphere is just a sphere of influence, right? The Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Well, we're just helping these Manchurians achieve prosperity right alongside us. We'll talk about the ways in which the Japanese helped the Manchurians achieve prosperity. It involved things like enslavement, forced labor camps, executions. By the way, one of the really wonderful things that the Japanese do, they like to look out for their soldiers, and there have to be a lot of Japanese soldiers stationed in Manchuria, away from their families. And I think we all know that in general, young men have appetites that go beyond their stomachs. And the Japanese army likes to provide for the contentment of its soldiers. So it set up special camps and barracks and filled them with Manchurian women, where these soldiers could go to whet their non-stomach-based appetites. And when inevitably those women would become pregnant, nobody wants a half Japanese, half Chinese baby because the half Chinese part is icky. And we don't want the soldier to have to be saddled with that. So if the woman concealed it well enough and they found out, they would slaughter the baby. If they found out early enough, they would try to perform an abortion. If not, if it was too late or they couldn't perform the abortion, they would just cut the woman's belly open, rip the fetus from her, and leave them both lying there dead as a model to, as those women in the camp, you should be more careful. Don't get pregnant. It's your fault.